Hi everybody, it's Joe Chaffee here, and here we go on this Tuesday. We got a very busy current weather situation with what's going on up in New England. Let me just see if I can fix this. There we go. Let me bring myself down there. Okay, we've got a pretty decent snowstorm going on up into central and northern New England and northeastern New York, and the lake effect machine has really turned on in a big way tonight in parts of upstate New York. I was looking at a friend of mine who is on the east shores of Lake Ontario on his Facebook post with some of the pictures, and they've been getting some really wicked snow squalls. And in fact, when I show you on the wide radar view, you can pick it out. This cluster right there in the east shores of Lake Ontario, just that wind coming in straight off the lake, and you can see this east-west line. It's very narrow here. Let me see if I can bring it up a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. But there you go. So you can see that the snow squall is developing. The wind is blowing pretty much straight west to east across the Lake Ontario the long way. So these squalls are pretty hefty, and they're coming in to areas just north and east of Syracuse, up near Pulaski, up to about Watertown. So they're going to get it in feet there, getting some more lake effect snows in southwestern New York State. Meanwhile, it is snowing throughout much of Vermont, northeastern New York, on up through New Hampshire and Maine. The low center, where you see these bright yellow cloud radar echoes with some heavy downpours and thunderstorms, the low center looks like it's sitting somewhere just northeast of Boston and moving on up toward coastal Maine. So this is a good old-fashioned central and northern New England storm, with the way the low wound up tracking to the north of New York City. For areas where I am, for example, we had the wind go to the south, and that brought in some light rain showers. We really didn't get that much in the way of rain out of this. But the temperatures at least briefly went up to the 50-degree mark, and now they've been falling off. The satellite view, you can see the deep trough here in the eastern part of the United States with how the clouds are turning, running north-northwest to south-southeast into the southeastern states, and then they turn northward up the eastern seaboard. So this is the mechanism that's going to be bringing down some very cold air. There's also another disturbance that's dropping southeastward, and this is going to be weak, but I think we're going to get into a little bit of snow here for my neck of the woods tomorrow night into early Thursday morning. And I also think it's going to be on the order of maybe a coating to an inch or so, although there might be some isolated amounts areas that get a little bit more. But, you know, from the standpoint of practical travel, this is going to fall Wednesday night with temperatures in the 20s. If we put down a coating of snow or a coating to an inch, that's going to make roads very slick. And it's not good. A lot of times it's those coating to an inch or two snows that wind up producing, you know, huge problems for commuters the next morning as they are slipping and sliding all over the place and not realizing that they have a very slick and dangerous situation on their hands. So just bear that in mind for Wednesday night and Thursday morning. Here's the new GFS model, and that low pulls out, but it doesn't really get out of the way, and this is why this system is not going to be able to develop very much. It brings down an area of snow. Now, sometimes what happens is, actually more often than not, the system is not going to energize in some excuse me. If the system is not going to energize in some way, you could have a lot of this snow get left back west of the mountains in Pennsylvania, where very little of it rides across. That's kind of what the GFS is showing here. The NAM is a little less, showing a bit more of the snow surviving. So I think the safe way is to say a coating to an inch or so, and we'll just sort of leave it at that. Then as we move into Friday, there will be another disturbance. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to do that. Let me see if I can get rid of that. Here we go. We got another disturbance that's going to be coming down, but again, there isn't a lot of room here. The new NAM model, which I'll show you in a second, does a little bit more with this. It actually does show a little bit of snow here Friday night, but the low center on the GFS is well east of North Carolina, and then that moves out. And, you know, you look at this going forward, you don't see any big storms or small ones either. The Europeans a bit more bullish with rain later Sunday, Sunday night, and Monday from that southern system. This one here. The GFS does nothing with that. And then as we move into next week, another weak system kind of comes out. You have a little bit of cold air that's trying to come down across the Great Lakes and Northeast. Also, by the middle of next week, some snows start to come back into the northern Rockies and dropping southward. In fact, as we move through the end of next week, although they kind of try to fight their way down and somehow manage their way down into Colorado and Utah and into the Southwest. Now, whether this happens or not remains to be seen. Also, as we move toward Christmas, it looks like the model wants to send out another low, and you can see it here. It sends out a low toward the Ohio Valley and into the Northeast with some snows for the Great Lakes. I'm still not sold on all this, folks. I got to tell you, to be honest, you know, the models are doing things the last couple of days that I'm not convinced with. Also notice late in the period, a big system comes into the west with some significant snows there. But you know, again, I'm not 100% sold yet. And let me show you what's happening with the upper air. First, before we do that, let's go to the NAM so I can show you real quick for Friday night into Saturday morning. And this is right here. I mean, it still has the surface low kind of developing far to the east. And it does generate a little bit of snow with this, but it's nothing that I'm going to get overly excited, worked up about at this point. Earlier this week, we had indications that maybe this one was going to be a little bit more important, but the problem is when we look at the upper air, it's not sharp enough. And you see down from Kansas into southwest Texas where the lines kind of make this sort of bottom of a U. You know, that's a trough there in the southern part of the jet stream, but that trough is getting stretched back southwestward. It doesn't really come out. The north comes down, but it really doesn't sharpen and swing around. So any coastal development happens, if this is right, well to the east of the Delaware coast and then just runs out toward the northeast. Now, let's look at the broad pattern here. Actually, before we do that, I got to get the GFS up so we can take a look at the upper air across North America. The model's doing, you know, kind of doing what it was starting to show yesterday, which I didn't believe, and I still am having a difficult time with this as far as what's going to happen. Here's the system. Let me back up here. Here's the system that's going through now with that shot of cold air. You can barely find the kink here in the upper flow that represents the system for Wednesday night and Thursday, because you've got this upper low up in eastern Canada. There really isn't any room for anything to develop. Still got that big ridge out in the west. The next trough dives down, but again, that southwestern part gets pulled away and never gets involved. Now, as we go into next week, you know, a bit of a flat ridge develops here in the eastern states over the weekend. You still have a cyclonic flow in Canada, but watch what happens late in the period. You know, once again, the model seems to want to bring troughing down into the west and drop it into the southwest. Now, this is different from yesterday, where it was basically cutting it off down in the southwest and really popping that ridge up in the eastern part of the U.S. I mean, it still pops the ridge, but it's nothing crazy. But it wants to kind of have the trough stretched out east-west, and then you've got this high up in Alaska that extends back over into Siberia. You know, that's sort of getting stretched out east-west. I don't know, it just kind of looks a little bizarre to me. Not that it couldn't happen this way, but I'm just not yet sold on the idea of that the troughing dropping back into the western part of the U.S. in the long range. So let's just say that right now things are a bit in flux, and we're just going to have to wait for several more runs. The European today, when we go out to day 10, this is the Europeans' look, and this is the GFS's look. You know, they're somewhat different here. The GFS goes really crazy, building up that upper high in the west. The European doesn't really do that. It does have a ridge there, but it doesn't go nuts with it. And it has a much more well-defined cyclonic flow in Canada. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm wondering whether we'll ever see a trough drop down into the southwest. And I just point out that back a month or so ago, we had the models do this in the long range for a few runs, and it wound up being total BS. So I'm going to say, prove it to me. Maybe this is going to be one of those hiccups where it does it for a couple of days and then it reverts back to what we've had. I don't know. I'm just kind of openly speculating. We'll take a look at what's happening with all of this. The weather in eastern Canada might be good to take a look at. So let me shrink the map down just a smidge so we can get the whole geography in there. And we'll go to the GFS so I can show you precip. And we got that. And we got that. And we'll go to the beginning. So this storm, by the way, the one that's in New England now, is tracking pretty far to the west. So you can see there's rain for Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland out of this. And then that low winds up in Labrador, a little bit of backside snows over the end toward the end of the week. And following along with the next system, looks like that one passes well to the south, just clips southeastern Newfoundland with a little bit of snow and probably a little bit of ocean effect going on. There really isn't anything big in the cards here for southeastern Canada for the next week to 10 days, although this system here in the long range looks like that wants to rev up, but that's more rain than anything else in Newfoundland until it changes on the backside. And after that, a lot depends on whether the upper air pattern is correct the way the model's showing it as we go into day 10 and day 11 and day 12. So I'm just going to kind of stop it at this point because we'll be just wildly speculating. Now, let's go to Europe, where we've got some more action happening as the next system with some colder air. Looks like we're going to see some snow here tomorrow night and Thursday in parts of Great Britain. And I want to look at these temperatures. So let's look at the temperatures here. These are the 2-meter temperatures for Thursday 6 a.m. They're just near or just over freezing, a little bit cold up in Scotland, so they're just kind of borderline cold here. And the overall pattern gets a little bit wintry going into the weekend with one of the weather systems going by. Here's a midnight temperatures that are down around -3, -4. You get into Sunday morning, you're talking about lows down in the 20s across much of England. And then after that, it looks like it may try to warm up a bit next week. So some snow is going to be coming out of this. We'll show you on the snow map. Much of this is going to be front end loaded. Looks like the bulk of this is going to fall inside the first 5 days. So we'll rotate that through for you. So it looks like there might be some places that'll get 10 or 12 centimeters or more. But I think the worst of the worst one, we had that the really bad winter storm late last week. So this one, doesn't look quite as this round doesn't look quite as ominous, but still getting some wintry weather up in the British Isles. Ireland looks like you guys could do pretty well. Wales also getting into some hefty snows here over the next 5 days or so. Back to the U.S. As far as snow is concerned, a lot of this is going to be front-end loaded here in the Northeast. And you're getting also the lake effect action, which the models are never going to be really that good with, but I'm sure there are going to be some 1 foot plus amounts, a lot of lake effect country over the next couple of days. I have this out now through next Monday. So let me go to the Midwest. And we'll go to the Great Lakes, and you can see the snows for the Great Lakes. Now, Wednesday night into, tomorrow, during later tonight and tomorrow, as this system is dropping down from the northern plains, you can see there's kind of a stripe of snow here that falls. And I'll show you, we'll put it in motion here, starting with Wednesday morning. So there's going to be some general, I think, 2 to 4, 3 to 5 inch snows for places like Detroit, Grand Rapids, on up maybe toward about Green Bay, perhaps. Back over, it might be just a little bit north of Madison and Milwaukee, but much of central and northern Wisconsin looks to get a few inches from all this. Also, this will extend down into parts of Ohio with the general 1 to 3 inch snowfall, maybe some higher amounts in northeastern Ohio, and into the western half of Pennsylvania, where there could be some 2 to 4 inch amounts. And then in the west, this is a little tough to figure because of the fact that in the west, again, the big question here in the west is going to be, is that trough going to drop into the western states or not? Because if it's dropping southward the way it's showing, then you're going to see this expanding area of snow through the next 10 days, particularly in the back end, so the second 5 days, down to the northern and central Rockies, northern Nevada, most of Utah, northern California, and down into central California and the mountains that are out to the east, and then of course clear on up into Oregon and Washington. But that's a big if. That trough needs to, the bottom of that trough needs to drop down into the southwest for that to happen. So, all of this, for those of you who are weather buffs, this is a really interesting, period that we're entering in. And I've often noticed that, whatever pattern we kind of see in mid to late December, it may like to lock in for a while. So I think what we're seeing right now the next couple of weeks is going to be really important in terms of where we're going in the long range with our weather. So off to the chat board I go, and here we are. Glad to see everybody on here tonight. Big collective hello. Ellen Abraham is 38 degrees for Alaska. Where in Alaska are you? I'd be curious. I've been reading some stuff about record snows in some places, but Alaska is a humongous state geographically. So where exactly are you? William Chin asked before, why isn't Long Island getting any snow out of this? Well, you get a low center that tracks to the north of New York City, or even just to the south of New York City. You got to get it to go down, maybe the Delaware coast or a little further south than that to get snow to lock in the cold air, and that's not the case here. The low wound up going across northern Pennsylvania and redeveloped basically on top or just to our north, and that brings milder air up from the south, so we get into some rain. Ronnie Abramowitz, I'm not seeing that weekend storm trending westward. The trough is getting weaker and flatter, so that would kind of argue against snow for Friday night into Saturday. Always smiling, keep the blankets handy for the very cold weather that you're going to get going into this weekend, and a little more snow before the pattern warms up a little bit. Jim Madigan, I recognize you. You're always with the transient. All cold is transient. That is quite true. Quite true. But that's kind of not how you should look at these things. You got to look at how the broad scale pattern evolves, and then you see whether you're going to get any chances for snow along the way if you're a snow lover. But transient, it's always, cold is always transient. Anything that's above normal or below normal is always transient. Scott Olson in Bensalem, Bucks County, PA, near Parks Racing. I've passed that racetrack so many times as my daughter goes to school in southeastern PA, and I have yet to stop there. I've got one of these days, I've got to stop and watch a few races at Parks. I'm going to get there one of these days. Let's see. Northwest winds, Ryan Kong, the Asian weather boy, 25 to 35 with gusts to 50. Wow. With this next system dropping down, I didn't pay too close attention to that. Let me take a look. Gradient doesn't look that tight. Well, I'll trust you. I won't check the obs. It gets kind of breezy, I guess, with this low going by just to your, right over in western Minnesota and drops down into eastern Iowa. So if you're saying it's 20 to 30 and gusty, go for it. 9 so far. Paul Vizentini, 9 inches on the ground in West Topsham, Vermont. Nice. Very nice. Much needed rain for California, Scott Olson, if the trough drops in the west, which is not, I'm not sold. I am not sold on this. Let's see. Just kind of getting through all your comments. Always smiling. We took you all through Europe, so you got, some more precip and some more snow to deal with at some point over the next few days before the pattern takes a break for you. And I appreciate it. Thank you. There you go. Gary King's blank. Cold whiskey is our only hope. Well, I won't argue with you on that one. A.B. Robinson, getting married on the 22nd. Do I think it's too early to tell how the weather will be around Manhattan? Yeah, it's that would be a wild guess, at this point. So I'll tell you what. Why don't we wait till Friday or Saturday? We'll probably get a better, a better handle. Once we get inside 7 days, I can tell you something that's a little more meaningful. Right now it would be just a guess. They are still predicting a white Christmas in St. Louis. Well, if you get that trough to drop in the west the way it is and have a strong northern jet that comes across Montana and into the Dakotas like that, you might pull it off in St. Louis. But again, that's the big if. Is that real? I don't know. Honestly, that's one thing with me, folks. You'll notice if I don't know, I'll say it. I don't know. I try not to. I'll make a stab at a forecast and a good guess when I feel confident about something. But when I'm not sure and something really doesn't stack up well in terms of the overall scheme of things, I will be very, upfront about the fact that I'm just not sure. And that I think that's, I think that's an honest. I try to be honest about how what I'm seeing, and sometimes it's confusing to me. It doesn't always. It's not always clear cut and dry. Sometimes it is. Most times it isn't. It's kind of like working your way through a mystery and figuring out where all the clues are. So let's stop right here. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. I'm jumping ahead here. I don't know. I guess I want the week to move along. So have a great rest of your Tuesday night. Robert Kelsey, my son is serving in the Air Force and is stationed in South Korea. I was wondering what the weather outlook will be for him this winter. They do get snow in South Korea. I mean, that's a pretty wintry place, especially away from coastal areas. I'm not too familiar with the specifics, although I did happen to notice yesterday I was watching some weather presentation for the Pacific. The eastern part of the Pacific there, and I'm sorry, the eastern part of China, China, Korea, Japan, and there was snow from central Japan forecast northward up into Korea. So, judging by the weather that goes on in the eastern part of the United States, it's probably fairly similar on the east coast of China, and then extending out to Korea and over to Japan. Let's see, but I'll see if I can get a deeper look at this. Delvin wants the weather from eastern China, maybe from the coastline 30 north in Hong Kong. I'm going to have to extend this show to 2 hours or so if we're going to start going to every spot around the globe. All right, you know what? Time to say goodbye. Let's see. Yeah. By the way, Tom Adams. Yes. The imminent Arctic air is not that cold, must be contaminated by Pacific air or influenced by core gas or both. Please comment. Well, it is this time of year, okay? Remember, we are at, we're still not even halfway through the month of December, so that part of the world is still in a rapid cool down. So when you look at the anomalies, and I'll just pull those up off. I won't bring them on the screen. But I'm just looking at the anomalies extending down through central Canada, from Hudson Bay, into southeast, into eastern Canada, and into the northeast. We're still running every bit of 12 to 16 degrees or more below normal out of this air mass. So that's a lot. Okay, I mean, it's not obviously it's not minus 20 or 25. It's not crazy cold. But you still that's still a sizable anomaly for this time of year. And remember, your normals are still going to drop from here by another 5 to 7 degrees before they reach their bottoms. So an air mass like this in January and an early part of February would have the temperatures at least 10 degrees lower than what they are now. Thomas Bullock, the battleground, the trough and ridge around Christmas time near Louisiana. Well, you know what? Maybe the trough will set up along about 90 west. There's no reason why it couldn't do that. There have been many winters where the trough sets up down along 90, which is can be problematic for warm air coming up the east coast from time to time, and put some ice storm issues into the mix too. So we'll see. But look, there's a lot of flux here, a lot of variability, and we're going to just have to sit and wait and see how the models handle things over the next 3 or 4 days before we come to any particular conclusion. All right, folks, calling it a night. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you on Wednesday with the next live stream. Going to schedule it for the same time, 6 o'clock Eastern. So we'll see you. Take care.